Alright, well, I got part of this brake pedal off. Well, I got the bolt nuts off anyway, and that's why I decided I'm going to do this before I actually do the transmission swap. First thing I did was disconnected the cruise control mechanism is attached here. There's a pedal, brake pedal there. It comes up and engages a switch there that turns off. So I took this out because it was in the way. I could have maybe taken out the plastic, this thing, but I'm not entirely sure. I can't really see around there, and I don't want to break it, so I'm just being incredibly careful going around it. So the other thing I did, and you can get to all four of the nuts on the back side. There's one here, one up there you can kind of see, and there you can see two others over there. And the biggest pain in the butt is this gets in the way of that third one. But luckily, like I said, I got the nuts off. See the one in the back there. You can get it on there, on the nut, to take it off. It doesn't quite, using, just socket with a couple attachments to it. And then there's two more up in there, which can't really see the nuts, but you see the slots there. You can get to those two. Just be careful when you get to this one. It's right above this here. You can get the tool up in there. Just make sure when you're torquing it not to break that. That would be bad. So now the biggest problem is I got all the nuts off, but like I've heard, the bracket here is glued, I assume, to this in the back. As you can see, it wants to come off, but I'm going to have to probably cut that lining, this black lining. So, yeah, so that's what I'm going to be doing next. Take me a few hours, and then I'll turn the camera back on and make it look like it took me 2 seconds. But, and one thing I forgot to mention, there's a little clip, this clip here, which holds the, the brake booster onto the pedal. You just take the clip off and it pops off, so that's fairly straightforward. But, anyway, see you in a couple hours, or, well, I mean, 2 minutes. I'll be done with this in 2 minutes. Okay, well, it's been about an hour and a half. Finally got this little out. As you can see, it was a pain in the butt. Had to cut that. The rubber actually cuts really well, and I cut it with my Leatherman. Here it is. Which this actually worked out really well, better than a box cutter, because I needed a lot of length to get to stuff, so it actually worked out well. I didn't remove the brake booster, which I see why you might want to remove the brake booster, because if you look up in there, well, one thing I did do was took this bracket off. This one here goes up, holds the steering column in place. There's just 4 bolts that hold it, and then there's a bolt that goes in through here that holds the steering column in place. And unfortunately, I had to remove the dash, or the covers here, and the metal pan that covers it, and remove a couple bolts up here. This one I just have holding the steering column in place, otherwise the steering column would fall on me. But what that allowed me to do is, just by taking that bracket off and loosening it up, be able to push that down so I could wrench the brake bracket out. It also made it easier taking the actual pedal off too. Okay, it's been another hour or so. So we finally got it in there. It's nice and solidly in there now, the standard bracket. And only thing that actually set me back a little more is I rerouted the battery to the trunk, and unfortunately I used the exact same hole. You can see there, see that hole? That's the hole that the clutch cable goes through, and I used that. So I kind of had to be a little imaginative, but I cut a slot in there to so I can kind of put the battery cables over to the side, so I can use that for the clutch cable. So the next order is I'm going to hook up the pedals after I remount the steering column. Okay, now I'm feeling a little more confident about this working. Here's that bracket I had taken off. It's got the nut holding it in place, so that's gonna be a bushing that slides through here that holds the steering column in place. So I'm going to attach that bracket, and then there's a couple more bolts up here. See, there's the steering wheel up here where the what mounts the rest of the bracket to it. So this is a separate bracket, but it mounts into that welded bracket that I found out I couldn't take off, which is this guy right here. So not entirely clear, but to give you a frame of reference, there's the brake booster, there's the steering column, comes up. You do have to remove this bracket, which is a separate piece. There's 4 bolts, 1, 2, there's 3, 4. And you have to take this bushing out, takes the bracket out, and then you take the bolts off here so that you can actually, you know, move this out of the way. So you don't have to take the steering column off, but you have to loosen it up and be able to move it around. Make sure the steering column doesn't fall on you. You can have a nut. This nut here is just holding it, keeping it from falling on me. So you can do that, and it allows you to have freedom to move it around, which makes it easier to get the bracket out. And then on top of which, the brake booster, you don't have to remove it, but when you remove those 4 nuts, you can actually grab the brake booster from the outside, and you can actually push these out, pull it out just a little bit without actually having to disconnect the master cylinder. So those 2 things, brake booster, master cylinder, and the steering column, you don't have to remove them, just remove enough to be able to move them out of the way, just enough to get the bracket out of the way, or the brake, you know, the pedal bracket. So that's what I did, and try to document it the best I can. There's still a lot of little imaginative things you had to do, but I'll write it down the best I can, and hopefully that kind of explains something on how to do it. So. Alright, there, the pedals are in there. That's what it looks like. Just took the automatic brake pedal for now and cut it. And I think that should work for now. There's enough room between it and the clutch.